Next up, we have Anthony Hopkins, who's going to talk about the project Love Libraries, Love Volunteering at Merton Libraries. Hi, Anthony.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm just going to share my screen when I find the slides. So I'm just going to share these for you. Hopefully you can see those. I'll just put those into presenter mode, and then we'll make a start. Okay. So yeah, good morning, everybody. So I'm Anthony Hopkins. I'm the Head of Libraries, Heritage and Adult Education for the London Borough of Merton. And I'm here really probably talk about two things really. So Love Libraries, Love Volunteering. So this was a pan-London approach to really looking at how we can nurture and recruit and build up our volunteer base across the London network. But I firstly wanted to start by just giving a bit of basis and a bit of context about the Merton model of volunteering, because that was very much what the Love Libraries, Love Volunteering project was based on. So just a bit of background information. So history of volunteering, so talking very much from a Merton-centric perspective, is there's a history of volunteering that goes back over 20 years, and the scope and the variety of roles has developed significantly since the initial inception. And there was really kind of two kind of key points where we really kind of started to maneuver into the current model and relationship that we have now. So the first was a formal partnership that we established with our local voluntary service council to deliver the home visits library service on our behalf. It was part of an efficiency saving, but also meant that we could look at a different model around volunteering. So very much around that was about befriending and being able to ensure that volunteers could spend more time with clients. So as well as the usual home visits library services of visiting and book selection and other things, the volunteers managed to develop a lot more, could spend a lot more time with the clients. And it was also linked to a local befriending scheme we had. So that was one of the first things where we really saw the kind of opportunity about how we can formalize those partnerships with local voluntary service councils, and how the power of volunteers really adds a lot of value to what we do. The next was our volunteer strategy in 2010 that we launched. And I'd emphasize this was a package of different measures when we were going through quite a significant workforce transformation. So we've never looked at volunteering as just being an item all on its own in isolation. We always see it as part of the bigger picture and part of the wider offer, and how we can utilize and maximize our volunteer capacity to really improve the services that we provide and make them more representative of the communities we serve. And as it says there, it's part of the foundation for extending our opening hours. And the 5 tenets of that workforce transformation, one of which is being volunteering, is still very much in place today in terms of the way that we work. And as I've said, and as I will say quite a lot through this presentation as well, it's really, really important within developing volunteering roles and the volunteering strategy that you're very, very clear around the delineation between staff and volunteer roles. So I'm speaking in the capacity of a service that doesn't have any community managed libraries. So all our libraries are staffed. But we have a significant number of volunteers who support the service, and there's clear delineation in roles and ways of working, which really help foster a really good way of working together, and also enable staff to focus on some of the core professional work, which we all know is crucial to run a modern public library. So I'm just going to start talking a bit more about some of the detail of what we did and some key tips. And this is just an example of some of the promotional items that we use to recruit volunteers. It's just one of the postcards and posters that we use to recruit. Before I do that, the benefits of volunteering, fairly obvious, but really just to re-emphasize as well. It's an opportunity for training, opportunity for people who are seeking to go back into work, to increase their employability prospects, opportunity for people to do something for their community and make them feel more part of their community and give back. And there's a big, strong theme around well-being and a sense of value within our volunteers, and within that they're contributing to libraries, because as we know, libraries are tremendously well valued by our residents and our communities, and there's no better places really to recruit volunteers in because of that love and that shared value around the spaces and the services provided. So now I'm just going to move on to some key tips and just some advice. So as you can see from the background, it does take time to develop your volunteering strategy and to develop the kind of level of service that you really want to establish. I've talked about a period over 20 years, but I would say probably the real significant work took about 2 years to fully foster the levels and numbers of volunteers that we have now, which I'll mention later on. Very important to formalize the relationship, like I said, not just around the delineation between staff and volunteer roles, but also be very clear on what you're expecting the volunteers. So we have role descriptions for all our volunteers outlining the number of hours we'd like them to contribute to, what the role consists of, very importantly, what training and support they will get. And other elements in there. So it's really, really clear about what people are seeking to volunteer for. We always say make use of volunteering bodies. So your local voluntary service council or volunteer centre, very important to work with them, because a lot of these foundations around role descriptions and other elements, they will already have in place and can advise you on that. This is something I feel very strongly about as well. Volunteers are not free, and I think it shouldn't be recognised in that way. So we invest a lot in volunteers in terms of training, and they have equal access to a lot of our corporate learning and development opportunities. We do pay expenses as well for any out-of-pocket expenses, be that whether that's travel or kind of out-of-pocket lunch expenses. We believe that there shouldn't be a barrier for anybody to be able to volunteer and contribute their time to their local libraries and to their local community. So we base our recruitment processes and our offer on that basis. Very important to engage with human resources, staff and unions throughout. It's really, really integral that we actually form a form of trust and be very clear about the expectations of what volunteers are there to contribute to, and also what the role of staff and management are in it. And I'd say really, really crucially, the success of the Merton model of volunteering is really, really on the basis of how well the staff recruit and support volunteers. It couldn't have been done without them, and it's a really, really important and integral part of what we do. Think also about risk management, so DBS checks, insurances, other elements. First check is probably really to look at what your corporate policies are in that, I would suggest. So thinking very much around your HR policies, there probably is already volunteer policies in place corporately. If there's not, then there's examples you can see from other councils, or you're welcome to contact me separately, and we can advise on that. But yeah, just really thinking about the kinds of roles, the kind of access to the communities that some of the volunteers would have, and think of it in a similar way to what you would do in terms of assessing staff around DBS checks and insurances. Also, what we'd say is ensure that the recruitment process is really quick and accessible. So if somebody applied either online or they came in person to a Merton library with an interest to becoming a volunteer, we have a usual turnaround of under 5 days from someone stating initial interest to starting in some capacity. It may be that GBS checks haven't cleared in that time, and we would risk assess and look at some roles where they could undertake duties that wouldn't put them at risk or put the community at risk to others, but also ensure that they can get training and support. Because a lot of people, if they want to volunteer, they want to give up their time, they want to do it, they want to do it quite swiftly. And also that exception within the model that some people want to volunteer for a month, 2 months, others are looking at this as a long-term commitment. And I think it's, the way within the model that we do is we say that both things are absolutely fine, and we look at the role descriptions and the roles around that to tailor them to those individual interests. And finally, really celebrate the success and diversity of your volunteers. We do a lot of thank you events and different things throughout the year to really, really acknowledge the role that our volunteers play, and to really thank them and make them feel valued in terms of what they are doing, because it's absolutely tremendous what they contribute to our services. And that's just a little picture of one of the smaller gatherings we had at Morden Library earlier this year, of a thank you event that we did. And just as a small token of our recognition, we put on a lunch, and as you can see, there's some awards and certificates for our volunteers at Morden Library. We do bigger service ones each year as well, which are more like a social event as well. The next one coming up in a few months' time. So this is just some of the outcomes from the Merton model of volunteering. So on average, we have over 700 volunteers per year, contributing over 28,000 hours of time annually, which is a significant amount. And if you equated that into staffing hours, it's tremendous. Broadly speaking, on an average month, we normally have about 300 volunteers supporting us. And that equates to probably about 10 volunteers to every one paid member of staff. So just to give you some kind of level of the scope of what we do. Our model has been used as a volunteer in England, good practice example, particularly around the sensitivities around those relationships around staffing and the delineation there. As I said previously, it's increased opening hours at all sites, and we've managed to retain all of our libraries, and we've moved to 100% customer satisfaction over the last few years. Volunteering has become a really great pipeline in terms of moving volunteers into direct employment. So we've had 21 volunteers over the last 10 years who started as volunteers and who are now either are now or have been direct employees of Merton Libraries. Some have moved on to management roles, and it's been a really, really great way of workforce development through there. And we also have partnerships with a local women's prison and a drug and alcohol recovery services, where for the women's prison, this is some of the women who are about to be released back into the community. On their day release, they will volunteer in libraries as part of their kind of readjustment to being back in the community and learning new skills and reacquainting themselves with the outside community and being able to engage with people. So that's a partnership that's been running for about 6 years. And we also have a partnership with our local drug and alcohol recovery services. And this is very much about people who are recovering, who are looking for something to do as part of their recovery. That this library volunteering role is often being a good way of being that first kind of readjustment into community and having a bit of regularity and familiarity within what they're doing, and obviously then moving on through their recovery processes. And another award which we were acknowledged for, this is a Greater London Authority award, was the Team London Building Better Neighbourhoods Award. And then that segues very nicely into what I was going to talk about in terms of the Pan London project and the Love Libraries, Love Volunteering scheme that was initiated a little while ago now. And it's surprising when I look back and think this was 10 years ago, but it was. We were approached by Team London, which is part of the Greater London Authority. At that time, the Mayor of London was Boris Johnson, and his team and advisors approached us about looking to see if there could be some form of establishment of a Pan-London programme around volunteering to support libraries, particularly at a time of austerity when there was a lot of challenging issues across libraries nationally. So we established a Pan-London volunteering scheme, received £100,000 from Team London to roll out the project. And as I said, the aim was to increase volunteer and community representation within libraries. The basis of that was on the Merton model of volunteering. So the support, training, guidance and materials was developed both by London Borough of Merton Library Service and our partners, Volunteer Centre Merton. And 13 pilot boroughs were recruited and received training and support and guidance within that time. And what we developed was a number of reusable marketing materials, one example which I just showed on the previous slide, and developed a toolkit and materials, so advice and guidance for libraries around insurances, DBS checks, role descriptions, anything you would need to consider within developing a model of volunteering within your library service. And within 6 months of the inception of that project, we recruited almost 3,000 new volunteers across the pilot boroughs. And it's tremendously successful. I know we don't generally regard for statistics with too much regard these days, but if you look back, particularly at that time, you could see a really noticeable jump within volunteering within the year across all London libraries, and not just the pilot boroughs, because all of the materials were available to others as well. So it's really been a good foundation and a building block. And I think since then, a lot of that has moved in. I know our colleagues at DCMS are doing some work around volunteering and volunteering guidance and guidelines. And I know they've been using some of this within their materials and guidance. But it just goes to show with a little bit of funding and a little bit of energy behind this, what can be achieved in a short period of time. And that's just the end of my presentation. And just to say thank you very much for listening to me. If there's anything that anybody would like to contact me about afterwards, there's my contact details on the screen. I've also put a link to the Merton Library's website, where you can just see how some of our volunteering processes work and our online forms, if that is of interest to anybody. But thank you very much, and I will hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Yeah, it's interesting about the quick recruitment when people sort of make the decision they want to get going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. So next up, so we focused on volunteering so far this morning, but the aims of the Know Your Neighbourhood project is to increase volunteering, but also tackling chronic loneliness. And one really good example of that is the Warm Welcome campaign. So we have David Barkley here to talk to us about that today.
Hi everyone, thanks Tessa, great to be with you. I hope you can hear me okay. So I've got a few slides to share with you. Ian, I wonder if you would mind sharing them with us, is that possible? Or would you prefer me to share my screen?
Emma, are you able to share those for us?
Yes, I'll just get them up now. No
Thank
problem.
you. Well, Anthony, are you still sharing your screen? Okay.
Actually, oh, there we go. Great. Fab. So brilliant to be with you. My name's David, and I have the privilege of being the campaign director for the Warm Welcome campaign. I don't know about you, but I always find this time of year, the changing of seasons catches me out majorly. It feels like yesterday it was blazing hot sunshine at the start of September, and then suddenly it's cold, it gets dark quicker, it's rainier. And for me, that means I need to wear an extra layer, or I need to remember to pack an umbrella. But for lots of people in the UK, sadly, this changing of the season brings with it quite a different kind of sense of dread as they look forward to what's going to be coming in the coming months and what that will mean for them, both financially and in terms of their social experience. So if we go on to the next slide, and then the next one, and the next one. So this is why Warm Welcome exists, is that we know that there are huge numbers of people in the UK struggling to make ends meet at the best of times. For lots of people, the cost of living crisis has just become the new normal. And there's also large numbers of people in this country who are lonely and who are chronically lonely, as they always or often feel lonely. And winter makes both of those problems worse. And of course, both of those problems are related to each other. If you're poor, it's much harder for you to be able to get out and make those kind of social connections and have that support network. And that in turn makes it harder to get out of your financial situation. So we believe that no one should have to face the winter months alone. And if we go into the next slide, That's why Warm Welcome has a vision of turning poverty and isolation into warmth and local connection through the power of local spaces that are made by and for the community. So we exist to try and support local groups like libraries and others to create warm spaces, but not just warm spaces, warm welcome spaces. And that's powered by a vision of a fairer and friendlier society built by local communities. So if we go to the next slide. So as a campaign, our mission is to try and resource, celebrate and connect warm welcome spaces across the country, showing how people can work together to do this mission, and also to ensure that everybody knows that there is a space near them and they feel that open invitation to get involved as a guest or as a volunteer or as a partner of this kind of growing movement of local organizations. So next slide. So this all started last year, and it started with a meeting between civil society leaders and former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, where he was talking about the need for warm spaces and the depth of challenge that families were going to be facing last winter. And he's been a real champion of Warm Welcome ever since then. And he said recently, he said this about the Warm Welcome movement, that what's happened is a reflection not just of the scale of the problem that we're facing as a country, but also that real sense of the potential that often lies underutilized, undernoticed in our communities. And if we go into the next slide, we were amazed last winter at what happened. We set up the Warm Welcome campaign very rapidly and on a bit of a shoestring. And we created a website, we created a map. We thought if we get a few hundred spaces to register, we put them on a map and we crowdsource some resources for them, that will be a really positive thing to do. And we were just blown away. We ended up with over 7,000 local groups registering as Warm Welcome spaces. About a quarter of those were libraries in the end, which was brilliant to see. About half of them were churches, and then the rest were all different kinds of other faith groups, community spaces, community cafes. We did impact evaluation that found that between those 7,000 spaces, they welcomed about 500,000 people, 2.5 million individual visits. They had this army of 17,000 volunteers every week. And more than half of the people who came to the Warm Welcome spaces said that without them, they would have been at home with the heating off. And 60% said spaces helped them financially. But actually, none of you will be shocked to hear this. The biggest positive impact we found was not just on the financial, it was about social. It was about tackling loneliness and isolation. And the drop in people's sense of loneliness from engaging in a local Warm Welcome space was statistically huge. The depth of impact that these places made on people was really striking. And obviously for us to be able to gather that data at kind of national level at this scale, the beauty of Warm Welcome is that it's so bottom up, it's so organic, and it looks different in every different community, and it's led by local people and local volunteers. But we have that capacity to talk about this at scale, and that gives us the ability to crowd in resource and attention on this kind of activity, which is great. So the story of last winter is that people came for the warmth, but they came back for the welcome. So if we go into the next slide, here's what being a warm welcome space means to us. We want to keep the bar to participation as low as possible. And so for any organization, if you're offering a space which is warm, which is welcoming, which is safe, and which is free to enter, then you can be a registered warm welcome space. And from my perspective, that means every single library in this country can be part of this. Because you're already doing that at a basic level. And if spaces want to do more than that, if they want to run activities, if they want to offer food, if they want to offer co-working, that's brilliant. And we'll help them to do that. And we've got resources to help groups to think about how they can be creative with their space. But at the bottom line, if you're doing those 4 things, you're part of the movement as far as we're concerned. So if we go to the next slide. And then the next one after that, here's the kind of season of the campaign for this coming winter. Sorry, back a slide. Yeah, so we've got our launch event is happening online next Wednesday. And we're going to be talking about all the different aspects of the campaign and what we've got to offer. And then at the end of October, that's when the clocks will change, and that's when our map will go live and the campaign will kind of start properly. So between, we've got a new website launching later this week, and then from next week, spaces will be able to register on that website. And so we'll be building up that network of spaces again, ready for the clocks changing. And that's when we'll kind of go live. And then at the end of March, that's when the campaign will kind of come to an end. So next slide. So here are the key aspects of the campaign. We're going to have our map again. We're going to have an updated set of resources. We've got a brilliant handbook that we've put together for local groups. It'll have a huge range of different materials in there, tips around fundraising, about how to communicate your space, all kinds of stuff. We've got a partnership now with Rotary to help local Rotary groups to find and get involved in warm spaces, to help them with volunteering, to help them do fundraising around Christmas particularly. We've got, we're raising money to give out to spaces, and we've got all kinds of fundraising tips. And we've got other kinds of training and resources. We've got some free training from a great organization called Linking Lives, which is going to be available soon, which is all about how to have good conversations with people, how to be active listening, how to know when to signpost people, what is the kind of problem that actually you can tackle as a volunteer, and when do you need to be signposting to a professional. And then we've got a steering group that brings together, we've got more than 50 partner organizations nationally that all work together and share resources with local groups. And we bring them together in different thematic clusters. So we've actually started a bit of a cluster around libraries and how can we work to support libraries to be brilliant warm welcome spaces again this winter. And then next slide, coming into land now. So how to get involved? Come along to the launch event if you'd like to. On the 4th of October, I'll share some information about that in the chat. If you're a local group, you can register from next week. Or if you don't want to register, you can think about how you can work with other spaces in your area and run activities with them. The other brilliant thing about our map is it allows you to see what else is happening in your area. So you can see, are there churches nearby that are running warm spaces? Can you coordinate with them? Are there other organizations that you can partner with? And then come and join if you want to join the steering group, join a cluster, and generally spread the word. We just want as many people as possible to know that there is a warm space near them where they'll be seen and known and connected. And I think that's all really. We'd love to answer any questions that anyone might have. Yeah, I'll put a couple of things in the chat in terms of resources and things.
Yeah, I can see some great overlap with the Know Your Neighbourhood projects and what you've got going on. So I'm sure we'll definitely have some projects to put onto your website. There is a question here. Can you share the statistics you mentioned showing impact on loneliness and isolation?
Yes, I would love to do that. If you haven't seen our impact evaluation, I'll put a link to it in the chat. It's great because apart from anything else, it gives local groups a really solid evidence base to talk about their activity. You know, if you're thinking about, oh, we could run a knitting group in our library or whatever it might be, mums and toddlers group, but we might need some funding for that. And we're going to make an application to a local authority, to a trust, whatever it might be. You can look at the impact of warm spaces more generally last winter, and you can say, this is the data, this is the kind of impact that we can expect to have through this kind of activity. So yeah, I'll put a link to that just now.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If not, thank you very much for coming to speak to us today, and do share that information and we'll share it wider again. Thank you very much, David.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
So next up, we have one of the Know Your Neighbourhood projects. So we intend to use these knowledge sharing events for sharing about the projects that are underway in future. But as we're quite early on at the moment, we haven't had too many, but we do have Wakefield here today, Andrea Milligan and Chris Williams, to talk about their project for tackling loneliness through volunteering and social interaction.
Hi everybody, thanks for letting us join in today. We'll just share our screen.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
So a little bit of an introduction. Obviously, I'm Andrea, and beside me is my colleague Chris. We are both senior library officers, obviously for Wakefield County Library. We are here today to give you an update on our Know Your Neighbourhood project. We'll take you through the progress we've made so far, which includes details on collaboration and building new relationships with people and groups from rural areas. Next slide. The content of the presentation. So Wakefield, like a bit of introduction on Wakefield. We'll talk you around the service, the groups and the activities. We'll then go through the Know Your Neighbourhood project briefing, the project timeline, including the pilot branches, activity ideas, our volunteer roles and engagement. And then a bit of collaboration, the organisations who are keen to work with us, such as the volunteering community sector, local community groups, health groups, internal services, employment services and health specialists. And there'll also be an opportunity at the end if you want to ask us any questions. Next slide.
So across Wakefield, we have a total of 12 branches, along with the support of our hybrid mobile library and home library service. In addition to this, we also have a schools library service and we also have a prison library service at Wakefield Prison. Libraries are constantly, I've gone on to the next slide there. Libraries are constantly evolving, and along with most library service, we are always looking to expand our services to meet local needs and to raise funds to complement our activities. We are also constantly looking to develop current audiences and attract new ones to our innovative services, activities and events that serves our community's best needs. Wakefield Libraries are free to use, and that includes fine-free, and we don't require proof of ID anymore. We identified this this requirement as a barrier to those who are vulnerable, such as homeless. We are safe and welcoming spaces for everybody, including for those who may feel vulnerable or threatened. We are information providers, free access to books, online resources, and accurate and relevant signposting to other services and agencies. We are activity providers. We have a vast range of activities such as author visits, social groups, story times and crafts for children. We have code clubs, we have library gardens, we have a digital hub, we have a makerspace, and we also have an amazing cinema. We also take activities out of the library, for example, to care homes and community events. We are dementia friendly, providing welcoming, understanding environments with access to valuable resources and services for people living with dementia and their families. In 2014, Sandal Library was opened as one of the first dementia-friendly libraries in the country, designed and furnished with the advice of the Alzheimer's Society as well. We have a number of dementia champions who work for libraries, and we also train all our branch staff, including casual staff. We're also Libraries Connected members, part of this inspiring organisation who advocate for the power of libraries. So a bit of background. So the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, Know Your Neighbourhood project is designed to widen participation in volunteering and tackle loneliness in 27 disadvantaged areas across England. A key focus of the programme will be to generate and share learning on how people in disadvantaged areas can be supported to volunteer and improve their social connections, which will help to support sustained action beyond the project. So the project aims to utilise volunteering to tackle loneliness across the district. The intention is to develop an understanding of what works to improve wellbeing and pride in places in communities through volunteering and community initiatives. Citizens will be able to participate in local projects which build their skills, wellbeing and social networks. So to start off with, from October, November and December, we're going to pilot the scheme where we'll be looking at 3 areas with the highest figures of loneliness. And they are Pontefract, including Nottingley, which is a rural area, South Emsall and Horbury. After these first 3 months, the project will be rolled out to the rest of our branches.
So our progress to date. Before submitting the bid, discussions were held with likely partners, and evidence and statistics relating to loneliness, isolation and volunteering in the district were gathered. This was done through our Live Well stats. Excuse me. Once we had confirmation of the successful bid, we began further engagement with prospective partners and began engaging with our staff, branches and specific groups who are at risk of loneliness. A partnership engagement presentation was developed and delivered through internal and external partners who were keen to be involved with the project. We have recruited a library officer. This was an internal candidate with a vast experience in working with volunteers and social isolated groups. Our new library officer also possesses valuable experience in the development of activities and events that target specific audience. A public consultation started, surveys developed and used in the 3 pilot branches with their existing groups to gather data on interest, what activities and events would they like to be and attend, and where the gaps were. Followed up on the consultation feedback, sourcing speakers and accessing venues. We have visited venues in Nottingham and booked 3 library events starting in October. We are looking at booking further events such as a chair-based exercise or mindfulness sessions. Activity planning, including 3 in our 3 pilot branches, with the addition of Nottingham, which is a rural and deprived area. Events in Nottingham are set to begin in early October with a range of library staff leading events that will engage with the community, tackle social isolation and also invite from potential volunteers. Next slide. The figures shown here is recorded of breakdown into the key areas such as gender, age and ward data. In order to ensure the pilot scheme was most efficient, we chose 3 targeted areas spread across the district. These areas will provide us with key findings and best practice where we roll out the project to our remaining branches.
So just a quick touch on our volunteers. So the pictures you can see here are from our volunteer celebration event recently, where we've awarded volunteers for Volunteer of the Year awards, and we have awards for Friends Group of the Year awards too. And we do have highly commendable awards, basically a runners-up award. So part of the project is to recruit a number of volunteers that are matched to roles that suit individual needs, such as gaining relevant experience or reducing social isolation. We currently have a volunteer recruitment process in place, which includes a variety of volunteer roles. We will be looking at evaluating the current roles and also developing new roles based on results from public and community consultation. Our current volunteers and Friends Group donate their time to enhance our current services and also enable us to provide additional services such as themed events and activities, including social, health and wellbeing, family and children's. As I mentioned earlier, we have a digital hub space and we have library gardens, and our volunteer groups were instrumental in helping us put them in place. We invite all our volunteers and Friends Groups to an annual award ceremony to celebrate their work and successful projects. And as I mentioned, this includes Volunteer of the Year Award and Friends of the Year Award. We aim to include the benefits and importance of volunteering to tackle loneliness and social isolation. Volunteering will not only improve social connections, but will also offer an opportunity to enhance skills or learn new skills and gain further experience. I believe, I don't think it's confirmed just yet, but I do believe we'll be introducing Citizen Coin to the Wakefield district to our volunteers. And if you've not heard of Citizens Coin, it's a volunteers app where they can register their volunteering time and activities, and they can get rewards, such as, for example, a discount from a local business. We aim to enlist a champion volunteer at each of the 12 branches, and this is a part of the plan to sustain activities as we move beyond the funding in 2025.
So these are some of the partners that we are working with at the moment. And to maximise our chance of success, obviously we have reached out to internal and external services with shared agendas who we may be able to work with jointly. Our children learning care team have identified loneliness and certain skills gaps in 16 and 17-year-olds leaving care or education. We are in discussions to try and put together a pilot program to help with the transition, partnering with the family hubs who have venues with facilities such as washing machines and cooking facilities. These sessions will include money management, personal safety when living alone, cooking and hygiene. They will provide vital life skills for young children and will hopefully improve social networks for young children. So these are mine and Chris's details if anybody wants to get in contact with us. And does anybody have any questions?
There is a question in the chat about the questionnaires. Were they for current users or potential users in the community as well?
Both, really. So yeah, the first people, we went out to a carers group meeting, and some of those people had not used our library services for since they closed Nottingham Library down. So they experienced difficulties such as travelling to the nearest branch and things like that, and they can't always access our mobile library service. So yeah, the questionnaire, the public consultation is available for everybody as well as current library users.
Thank you. And another, are the volunteer champions a member of staff at each library or one of the volunteers?
The volunteers champions will be volunteers, there won't be paid staff.
Thank you. And are your libraries community run or council run?
The council run.
Yeah, they're all
council run.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? So you're about to embark on your pilot then?
Yeah.
Just setting off.
Yeah, it's been
We're probably
exciting at the moment. We're really looking forward to getting started now and getting into the community and delivering these activities and events.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, here's another question. What are the most popular choices of activity?
we've come across mindfulness and loneliness groups, but also just social groups as well. So, I mean, as libraries, the majority of our adults' activities can be classed as social groups. So, yeah, things such as active minds, so something that generates conversation. So I think, yeah, the social side of the activities that we can offer is, and the mindfulness are the top ones.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Can't wait to hear more about how you get on, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So next up, we have our very own James Gray, who is going to give us a little talk about how to reach your community and raising awareness of your project to the community and to funders and so on. Hello, James.
Thank you very much. One way to avoid any problems with slides is not to have any. So, so I hope that's all right. But I thought by this point you probably have sort of slide fatigue. So I'm just going to sort of give you a few a few hints and tips maybe about promoting your Know Your Neighbourhood projects. I would start by saying that I know that you're the experts and you know your communities and you know your projects, and you've already heard from other speakers who've got a real sort of wealth of knowledge and experience. So I'm sure some of these tips will be really obvious, but hopefully some of them you will find helpful as well. And I've focused on recruiting volunteers and recruiting other kinds of participants for your projects. But hopefully some of this will be relevant for the other reasons why you might want to promote your project too. So the first thing I'd say is, you know, right at the start is to work out who your target audiences are. And actually, I think a lot of you have already done that through putting your projects together. But I think, you know, be as specific as possible. And then you know who you're trying to target. So it's not just the public, but you have a really clear idea of who it is you want to reach. And then when you've done that, you can start thinking about your key messages. So, you know, 2 or 3 main points that you want your target audiences to hear, to understand, and to remember about your project. So, you know, what action do you want them to take? How do you want them to think and feel about what it is that you're doing? And I think really important here is that your key messages are sort of things that anyone can understand. So, you know, they don't have sort of jargon in or anything like that. And I know in the library sector we're quite keen on jargon, but strip it of all of that and make it really easy to understand. Once you've got those key messages, and I think that's a really sort of good process to go through, then you can start thinking about, you know, the kinds of tactics and the kinds of channels that you want to use to get those messages to your target audiences. And I'd say, and I think this has come out in the presentations already today, that the most effective way of doing that is to go where they already are. So that could be where they are sort of physically, or where they are digitally or socially, or however you want to put it. But often that's through existing networks. So, you know, is it carers groups? Is it, I mean, like, you know, local Facebook groups have an absolutely massive reach. You know, is it schools? Is it getting in the school newsletter to reach parents, or is it through nurseries or churches, or you know, it could be veterans organisations or a university careers office. It's those sort of marketing partnerships that can be really, really powerful. And then you're not trying to start from scratch. You're not trying to, you know, duplicating work that someone else has already done. You're sort of piggybacking on that, and it tends to be much more effective. So I suppose, you know, it's just always worth bearing in mind that you know, word of mouth is probably the biggest, most effective way of recruiting volunteers. But word of mouth isn't something that just happens by accident. You have to sort of make it happen, and those partnerships can be really really powerful. The other thing I'd say is you know, most of you, I think on this call, you know, work within a local authority. So, you know, make friends with your corporate comms team if you're not already friends with them, and you know, get their help to send a press release to local press if you can persuade them to do that, and you know, include on that local radio, student radio, hospital radio, all those kind of things that maybe don't have a massive audience, but actually that audience could be bang on your target. So it's really worth sort of reaching out to those sorts of media outlets if you can. Same with sort of college magazines and university magazines. Another really powerful channel in terms of local media is the letters pages as well, which are one of the most widely read parts of local papers, which themselves are quite well read. So it could be about actually, you know, getting an existing volunteer to write their letter to the local paper saying, you know, how important this project is, or it could be you that writes it. But that can be quite a good way of reaching people. The other things that local authorities also tend to do is magazines that they distribute to every resident in the authority. They have email newsletters which have an enormous reach. So if you can, again, it's probably through your corporate comms team is to get mentions of your project in there. And the other thing which I've seen recently in terms of sort of volunteer recruitment campaigns is people using empty shops on high streets as a sort of showcase for volunteering opportunities. I think, you know, the fashionable term is meanwhile spaces, isn't it? But maybe worth having a chat to someone in your authority to see if that's something that you can pursue. So you know, once you've decided your marketing tactics and you know you're decided to get some sort of marketing materials together, I think it's really important. You know, the more you read about this, the more you realise how important it is to think about the language that you're using in your recruitment materials. So, I think there's a general point about all marketing and comms is just be clear and be descriptive. So, you know, what you're offering and what you're asking for. But I think with volunteering, it's particularly important to talk about the difference that it can make, both for the volunteer, you know, an individual personal difference, but also for the community around them. So you're not just talking about the practical things that they're going to do, but you're talking about the impact that that's going to make, both for them and for the people around them. I'd say another tip is to use the words you and we quite a lot. So you're speaking directly, and that tends to make all sort of communications feel a bit more personal. And just to consider the language you use around loneliness as well, if that's something that you're going to be focusing on. And there's been quite a lot of research into this, and it's difficult to get a consensus on it. But I know that definitely some people respond much better to words like connect, relationships, support networks. They respond much better to those kind of words than loneliness. And that, you know, that's all to do with, you know, the stigma that could be around it. And, you know, some people have even suggested that talking about things like tackling loneliness or eradicating loneliness can actually reinforce that stigma. I know, you know, I have seen even the phrase an epidemic of loneliness. And, you know, I suppose you have to ask, well, if we're trying to sort of normalize loneliness and say, actually, this can happen to anyone at, you know, at different times in their life, is that the kind of language that we want to be using? So I don't think there's a clear answer to that, but I think it's definitely worth having that conversation and seeing how that might play with your target audiences. And sort of on that theme, I think the use of images is really important as well. So, you know, make sure that the images you use reflect your target audiences. Avoid those sort of cheesy stock images of particularly American ones of, you know, people with incredibly good teeth. And a good tip with that is to, if you're using something like Adobe Stock, which is quite a good site, you can actually narrow your results to UK images. So if you are using stock images, make sure you use ones that are from the UK, because I think people can tell. And again, there's some research around this, and it tends to suggest that those experiencing loneliness want to see images of, first of all, people of the same age and in similar life circumstances. So, you know, if you can find images that capture those sort of life changes that you're focused on, like parenthood or new job or, you know, health problems or something like that, then that's going to be, you know, that could be more powerful and resonate with the audience a lot better. But as you're going along, I think it's really important to take lots of your own photographs as well. So, you know, just to be able to use for social media, for press, even for evaluation and for future projects as well. So I would really, if you've got a decent camera and someone who knows how to use it, then that's brilliant. But it might even be worth, you know, finding some budget to pay a professional to come in and take some professional photographs of your projects. And again, hopefully your comms team will be able to give you any advice you need on sort of consent forms and things like that. And just wrapping up, really, I just thought it's important to emphasise that you know, that point about responsiveness. So you need to have, on all your materials, you need to have a really easy way for people to get in touch. So that could be, you know, WhatsApp is particularly popular at the moment. Is there a way that you can set a business WhatsApp profile up so people can just WhatsApp you about the opportunities? QR codes have come back. I thought they were dead a few years ago, but they seem to have come back. So it's just about giving people the opportunity to get in touch with you quickly and, you know, out hours whenever they might be, seeing your materials. And even if it's just an automated response, at least it's a response. The other thing is just to include, and this is really important, that you ensure, you include the correct logos and recognition and things like that, which I know Tessa has circulated to you, so you probably have those, but do feel free to ask us again if you've got questions about that. And then, monitoring where people are finding out about you. So how effective has your marketing and your comms actually been, and which channels are working, which ones aren't, which ones can you focus more on, and which ones can drop. So that, if you're monitoring where people are coming from, then you know how successful you'll be. And finally, I would just say is keep in touch with us and let us know what's going on, because from a Libraries Connected perspective, we love sharing, particularly because this is a project that we've championed and obviously playing a key role in. But we're always interested in hearing what libraries do, particularly if it's sort of innovative work in areas like this. So do keep us up to date. Either contact me directly or my colleague Edward, who looks after our social media, because we'd love to share with our networks and with our audiences what you've been up to and the progress that you're making. That's it, really. That's all I want to say, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, James. Are there any questions for James? We're off the hook. I've made some notes there, some great ideas. I love the empty shop idea. Oh, that's really lovely. So next up, we have appointed ERS Consulting as the evaluators for the Know Your Neighbourhood project. And so we've just invited them to come and speak today about using evaluation as a tool to develop practice more generally. But they are the evaluators for all of Strand 1. So that's Libraries Connected, Creative Lives and Association for Independent Museums. So I'll just hand over to Dan now.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks Tess for the introduction there. I'll just share my screen so I've got the presentation up. Bear with me 1 second, please. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, we can see it, thank you.
Great. So hello everyone, thanks for having us today. As Tess said, my name's Dan Walters. I'm not sure if my colleague Steph Anderson is in the call yet, but hopefully she'll be joining in a few minutes if not. As already said, I'm from ERS. We are a research consultancy. We have offices both in Newcastle and Bristol. And yeah, we've been commissioned to undertake the evaluation for the Strand 1 of the Know Your Neighbourhood project. So I'll get into it. So first of all, just to sort of give you an overview of what we will be covering today, we're going to be looking at what evaluation actually is, why do we evaluate, the principles of evaluation, conducting evaluation, and qualitative and quantitative data. Just to reassure people as well, this is just an introduction for now. We are going to be conducting a more detailed workshop in October for Libraries Connected and all the library services. So don't worry about taking all this in for now. This is just a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what you can expect throughout the 2 years and what evaluations. Okay, so first of all, I think it's important to consider what evaluation actually is. So evaluation is a method of finding out information, aiming to answer questions such as, have the aims been met? What, who, and how has the project changed? What are the outcomes? What causes change to happen? What has made the least or most difference? Has the project spent the money in the right way? What's been learnt? What went well? And what are the areas of best practice? And also, what are the challenges? So for Know Your Neighbourhood, we want to build the evidence base for the intervention of culture, heritage and arts in supporting volunteers and reducing loneliness. And then we also want to evidence this against actually increasing volunteering and reducing loneliness. So these are the aims of our evaluation. And also, for example, when looking at what causes changes to happen, this comes through effective research tool design, but we'll discuss this a bit later on in the presentation. So why do we evaluate? Well, there's many reasons why we evaluate, but I've got a short list here. So evaluation tells us how important a project is to audiences, both internal and external. It can highlight learning and help develop recommendations for improvement. It can highlight best practice, what's working well, what perhaps isn't working so well. Shows what difference the project has made to who, what, and how. It can demonstrate to funders how their money has been spent and what difference the money has made. And of course, help to secure further funding. And it can help to improve the legacy of the project and maximize its impacts. So I think when people think about evaluation, one of the key aspects is the funding. So evaluation is a great tool to evidence successes of a project. It can demonstrate the successes to funding bodies such as Arts Council England. And, you know, for the Know Your Neighbourhood evaluation strand 1, we understand that it's vital to bring the evidence, bring together the evidence from all the individual projects to highlight solutions and best practice and successes. So I think a good way to sometimes think about evaluations is think about the end point of it. So I've got a little example here. So let's imagine you win a hypothetical award for the best project delivered by a library service. Who goes up to collect the award? Who's thanked? What process led you to win the award? What does success look like? Is it the same for everyone? How do you measure this success? So you need to install evaluation practice as soon as possible to try and answer these questions. It will provide you with the data and the evidence needed to demonstrate a project's excellence. It will define what success is, and it will allow you to measure achievement. I think the point that we really want to get across is that we understand that monitoring evaluation is not necessarily the most exciting task for a project delivery team. We know that you know why you're doing the project. We know that you know what difference the project is making. You know, you're the experts. But for projects like Know Your Neighbourhood to continue in the future, we need people like funding bodies like the Arts Council England to see the unbiased fact. We need to show them that these projects have been a success in the raw data. So I think it's a good idea to think about evaluation in terms of some core principles. So I've got these on a list here. So clarity is key, gives you clear communication and allows a clear presentation of results. It helps prevent misinterpretation and it ensures informed decisions based on results. So, for example, for Know Your Neighbourhood, ERS have appointed designated points of contact for each delivery partner. So I will be the library connected point of contact. So I will be on hand throughout the process to assist with any queries or questions that people may have. And this just will ensure that clarity going forward. Integrity, of course, as well. So we need this to ensure objectivity, impartiality, and accuracy. Independence is key throughout evaluation, hence why we ERS have been commissioned, because we are independent and we're completely detached from the programme. So there's no chance of any bias getting involved there. Accessibility as well, this is key. Everyone should be able to access and take in the results of an evaluation, regardless of their abilities or background. And a way to do this is to map out key stakeholders and audiences prior to the start of evaluation. So then you can decide what are the key outputs and are they actually going to be accessible to people? Because there's no point conducting an evaluation over such a long period of time if no one can actually read it, or if the people who actually matter can't read it. So it also comes into play with research tools as well. So I think sometimes in our day and age, it's quite easy to forget that not everyone can use perhaps, you know, digital tools. So for those that face digital exclusion, for example, we're going to be providing paper copies of surveys for the Strand 1 evaluation. Trust as well. So trust encourages participation. It builds credibility. It's something that we, are going to strive to do throughout the Strand 1 evaluation. We recognise the impact it has on participation, and we want the participants and volunteers to have faith in our abilities. And it particularly links in with transparency, which I will discuss in just a moment. Equity as well. So it's crucial. It's important when designing research tools that everyone being evaluated and done so fairly. Otherwise, we're looking at potential issues with data being invalid and that kind of thing. Transparency. So this helps build trust, and it's sort of what I was alluding to earlier. So we want to ensure that the evaluation process and methods are open. We want to share research methods and findings where possible. And also we want to recognise limitations within an evaluation. It's certainly not a weakness to recognize limitations. And in fact, I think shying away from it can actually decrease credibility of an evaluation. So, just to hammer the point home again, as evaluators, we don't want to gatekeep strand one. We understand that you're the ones delivering it, and we want to be open and as transparent as possible with yourselves. And finally, diversity is key. So diversity helps avoid any bias and it ensures a greater range of insights. Okay, so moving on. I think a useful way to think about evaluation is to break it down into these four components that look quite simple, but in reality may have a little bit of thinking that you need to do. So planning, what do you actually need to know? So for strand one, we want to find out the information against the 4 objectives. And then we move on to designing. And this part can be perhaps a bit time consuming because it's all about understanding the best way that we can find out information. So this is a stage that ERS have just been going through over the past month or so. So we've been working with RSM, who are the overall process evaluators, NatSen and the other delivery partners to decide how we do this. And we have come to the conclusion that we're going to be designing 2 pathways to collect information. So 1 pathway for volunteers and 1 pathway for participants. These pathways consist of 4 options, and you'll be given the choice of these. So the first 2 pathways consist, so for these, if the first pathway is if the project will be taking place longer than 6 months. So for these, if the volunteer or beneficiary engages more than once a month, we will encourage them to complete a baseline, midline, and endline survey. If they engage less than once a month with a project or an intervention, they should complete a baseline and an endline survey. And then the second 2 options from the pathway are for projects that take less than 6 months to complete. So for these, if the volunteer or beneficiary engages more than once a month, once again, they will be encouraged to complete a baseline and an endline survey. But if they engage only less than once a month, we will encourage them to complete what we've called a reflection survey. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we've decided over the past month. Don't worry about taking that all in now. We will be discussing this in more detail in our workshop in October, but that's just to sort of give you a flavour and understanding of what we've decided to do for strand 1. Collecting, of course, this is all about using the tools and to collect the data. So for strand 1, as you've already gathered, I can imagine, we will be sending survey links to yourselves so that you can provide these to volunteers and beneficiaries to complete. And of course, presenting. This is all just about presenting the data, and it sort of links back to the accessibility of it, like I talked about previously. So then we need to talk about how we actually collect evidence. And the simple answer to a difficult question is that this does depend. We've sort of come up with 4 key questions that you need to understand when trying to think about how you collect evidence. So first of all, you need to understand the group of people you're working with, how many people engage, how often do they engage, and at what intensity do they engage. So, there really is no one way of collecting evidence. It's not an exact science. And this is why this evaluation has specifically been designed for strand 1 of Know Your Neighbourhood. And we are specifically looking at how libraries will engage. We know this will be different to the other 2 delivery organisations. So another example, let's say your library sets up a project celebrating the local history of your area. You plan to run this for 3 months. This project includes different activities such as weekly discussion groups, temporary exhibitions, and local visits to sites of interests. At what point of engagement do you collect data? Because you are going to have different levels of engagement. So somebody might only visit the exhibition once, or someone may attend the weekly discussion every week. Both of these experiences are equally important at demonstrating the impact of an intervention, but they do require different points of data collection. And that is why we've decided to set this 2 pathways, like I discussed earlier, as we feel this is the best way to collect the evidence that we need. So not only this, you also need to understand what you need from an evaluation. So what type of data do you want? This typically falls into 2 categories, so quantitative data and qualitative data. So quantitative data tends to be numerical. We're trying to address the what's or perhaps how many. We want to discover trends. Qualitative data, we're trying to address qualities or characteristics, and we're trying to discover themes. Of course, these aren't perfect. they both have challenges and practicalities of using them. So quantitative data tends to be more, needs to be more consistent, where qualitative data tends to be more time consuming. It can be a bit more difficult to draw comparisons and analyze. And I think what we're trying to say is that not everything you can count matters. Not everything that matters can be counted. It's not an exact science evaluation. All that you can do is try and design an evaluation that you best thinks collects evidence and that can present results against the objectives. So yeah, these 2 points are really important, I think. Finally, evaluation, it's always a choice, shouldn't exclude or discourage people from taking part in an intervention. The last thing we want to do is force people into taking part in an evaluation. We don't want to force people into filling out e-surveys. We don't want to force people into taking part in interviews. This is the last thing we want, because we understand the intervention is the most important thing. We will cover everything in more detail, like I've said, in our Know Your Neighbourhood workshop in October. This will also be recorded, so you can access at a later time. Everyone's welcome, even if you're not taking part in the Know Your Neighbourhood programme. We understand the value and importance of evaluation. And yeah, like I said, I will be on hand throughout the programme, throughout the 2 years, to assist with any queries or questions that yourselves might have. So yeah, thank you. That's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dan. We do have a question from Julia Robinson. Did you want to ask your question, Julia? Might just be a floating hand.
I think it is, sorry.
That's okay. Do we have any questions? As you say, I expect there'll be lots of questions when you get to the details in October in that workshop.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say it will be a lot detail, a lot longer. So we'll cover everything in more detail then, and hopefully things will be a little bit clearer.
That's great. Thank you so much for the overview. It's really handy.
No worries. Thank you.
Oh, there's a question about how to book onto the workshops, but I expect that all.
Yeah, I don't think we've fully decided how to do that just yet, but that will come and that will be communicated clearly.
Thank you. So we'll make sure that that's shared on Basecamp, etc.
Yes.
For our people involved in that. So that's the end of our agenda for today. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all the speakers. It's been a varied programme with some inspiring thoughts and informative training and examples of work already underway in libraries. So thanks to everyone, especially those battling colds and sore throats and everything. So thanks for coming. So just a note to say that DCMS are planning to share more details about the Know Your Neighbourhood Fund and the projects that have been awarded funding towards the end of October. So keep an eye out for that. And in the spirit of evaluation, we will be sharing a short evaluation form after this meeting. And so would appreciate any feedback on today's event. And if you could let us know any particular topics you'd like us to cover in the future events. These are taking place quarterly. So thank you very much, everyone.